They rode on into the mountains, and their way took them through high pine forests, wind in the trees, lonely bird calls. The shoeless mules slaloming through the dry grass and pine needles. In the blue coulees on the north slopes, narrow tailings of old snow. They rode up switchbacks through a lonely aspen wood, where the fallen leaves lay like golden disklets in the damp black trail. The leaves shifted in a million spangles down the pale corridors, and Glanton took one and turned it, like a tiny fan by its stem, and held it and let it fall, and its perfection was not lost on him. They rode through a narrow draw, where the leaves were shingled up in ice, and they crossed a high saddle at sunset, where wild doves were rocketing down the wind and passing through the gap a few feet off the ground, veering wildly among the ponies and dropping off down into the blue gulf below. They rode on into a dark fir forest, the little Spanish ponies sucking at the thin air. And just at dusk, as Glanton's horse was clambering over a fallen log, a lean blonde bear rose up out of the swale on the far side where it had been feeding and looked down at them with dim pig's eyes.
Hi, JVH.
Hi, Candy.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Good. We're still enjoying a lot of summer. Yeah,
It's pretty hot here in southwestern Ontario.
pretty hot here. It actually technically has cooled down in Chicago, but it's still pretty uncomfortable. I've got to redeem myself here. I want to say something. Pythagoreanism. I just have to say that one word and get it out that I can actually speak. I was just murdering it. I couldn't even speak it last time we recorded. And I definitely want to get that out. Hey, do you happen to have any missives from our listeners?
Oh, maybe we can do that at the end
Oh,
of
that's a
the
good idea. Okay, yeah, we
episode.
will. Ryan,
But
stay
yes, I
with
do.
us. We're going to read out a message from Ryan, one of our listeners, and it made us feel really good. And
Yeah, actually, thanks. I can read it out right now,
okay,
actually.
go for it. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, one of our listeners said, "Hey, I wanted to reach out to tell y'all that I just finished the first episode of the podcast and that I loved every second of it. I'm super excited to continue listening and just please know that you two have a massive fan with me." And that
Oh,
was really, really nice.
really
And
nice.
said some other really nice stuff too. Thanks a lot,
Yeah,
Ryan, for
thank you
listening.
very much. And we're fans of anyone listening too. It's a mutual admiration society. Because I was thinking we're so lucky in this very busy world. Most of us are very busy living in this society that we get to sit here and connect. Like have a gentle time to just sit here and talk about something that we're interested in, and maybe someone out there is feeling connected with us too. So that feels really good.
That's right. Yeah, we're sitting under the ruins of a great work of art. We're
That's wonderful.
debating what it means.
Yeah, are we ever? And I know that as the episodes come, I think we're going to get more and more deeply into it. This was an unexpected chapter for me. What you just read to me is one of the most beautiful parts of the novel to me. I just love it. And I have a love-hate with this chapter, as we'll find out as we go on. And but I love that. I want to say that I took a note where you're out in nature and you are overwhelmed on this. And so he describes dry grass, which is umber or yellowish, pine needles, which could be dry, light brown, pale evergreen, if anything, because it sounds like it's pretty dry there. Aspen wood, which is creamy white, palest yellow, with a golden shimmer. There's golden diskettes. There's millions of spangles, which are almost like a sequence. They're going to be glowing, right? And then contrast that with um, blue coulees, old snow. Old snow is like gray and blue or purple even. And then you've got a dark corridor, a damp black trail. And then you've got up in ice. All those shingled leaves, the aspen leaves are sitting in ice, which would be white and pale blue, mauve, silver again. And to me, that is so Van Gogh. It's so just absolutely I know there's paintings out there with those colors, and it's so beautiful. And then there's something else golden and honey. that shows up. That, that damn bear.
That's right. Yeah. Looking for
Oh,
his honey.
yeah. Tell me about old Ephraim. Did you say that that's like a nickname for bears?
I think it was a kind of a, yeah, it's sort of a nickname for bears, and like at least from the middle of the 19th century.
Hmm.
Um, like uh, I noticed that Teddy Roosevelt has a chapter called Old Ephraim in a book from 1895,
Ooh.
Hunting Trips of a Ranchman.
Hmm.
So it was kind of like yeah, just a kind of a folk name for bears.
Yeah.
Maybe no, for grizzly bears, I think
Or
in
grizzly
particular.
bear. Yeah, yeah. So that is a grizzly bear that we're talking about because they are the golden, yellow, pale, blonde ones. There's
Right, yeah. I mean,
10
yeah,
bears in the world, 8 bears in the world, 8 species, and that's a grizzly.
right, yeah. The notice of colors in that first paragraph was really, really nice. And when you were talking about relating it to painting, I actually kind of see like Lauren Harris type
Oh,
colors, like
definitely, definitely.
and
That's
and Harris was like, I mean, one of the group of seven, so Canadian painter,
yeah.
but like he also was a Neoplatonist and
Hmm.
and had these kind of Neoplatonic theories of color. And so yellow was like the sign of intelligence or something like that, like of the
Mm.
good or something like that.
Mm.
But this bear, yeah, is pretty amazing
He is
intrusion.
amazing. He is an amazing.
Yeah.
And it reminds me, of course, that we have bears. We've got bears on 12 pages in Blood Meridian, which is, one every 2 chapters. That's pretty, they probably shows up more than that, but bear is mentioned. And it's in the first paragraph of the novel. I won't take too long on this, but I want to say that the Ursa Major and Minor are considered great bears and little bears.
Right, yes.
Yeah, so that could tie into my feeling of a mnemonics reading of this novel. Um, and he also says this bear is the bear from Fable.
Right, yes. Yeah, he says he
Cool.
characterizes the bear in a couple of interesting ways. Yeah, he says he again it's like a simile, right? Well, the simile I think you're thinking of was like the bear had carried off their kinsman like some fabled storybook beast.
Yes. Yes.
And the paragraph that I read, he's described as having dim pig's eyes.
Yes.
And so like it's for me it was kind of cool because like the judge's eyes will be characterized as pig's eyes
Mhm.
much later in the novel, and like with respect to this some fabled storybook beast, well the kid right in chapter one was described as like some fairy book beast, so
Mhm.
in a weird way old Ephraim is a figure in which the judge and the kid intermingle in different ways or are made to.
Mm.
I don't know what that might mean or
Yeah.
anything, but I think it's kind of interesting that he uses descriptors for this bear too, one that also he uses on the kid and one he uses on the judge.
Right, right. That is pretty cool. Well, and I think, I looked it up after I was trying to tell you about this, but we do share genes with dogs and bears and obviously primates. Something like 99% with chimpanzees, but about 84% with a bear. So that, they are connected to us in some strange
Hmm.
way. And then physically, you think about when a bear gets up on its hind legs and is standing there, you can really imagine a human being inside that bear suit.
Well, we're gonna get a dancing bear at the end of
We
the
are.
novel.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep, we are. Shh,
And it's actually, like you were mentioning like bear family and related it to the dog, and there's also a dog in this chapter, right? Like
correct.
Glanton, he's not able to man, quote unquote, old Ephraim, but he mans the dog, right? Like
Mhm,
at the
mhm,
end. So
mhm, mhm.
so that is kind of interesting that these two animals that are connected are in
Yeah,
the same
yeah,
chapter.
yeah. And horses. We share something with horses, but maybe not as much DNA or genes. I should say genes, not DNA, probably. Um, well, also about the fable is that, you know, there's a story about the Ursa Major that hunters are chasing this great bear. This is an indigenous story. Um, and they get so caught up in chasing it and following it, and the bear jumps off a cliff into the sky, and he assumes that the hunters won't follow him, but they do follow him. So those are the 3 stars that come out of tail of the Big Dipper, if you will, or in that constellation. The Big Dipper is an asterism inside a constellation, but those specific stars, the mythology is that those are hunters and they can never catch up with the bear, of course, because it's always revolving around another star, right? And there it is that we have three Delawares and a dog in that chapter. So it's kind of haunting. It's very subtle. It's not banging us over the head or anything like that, but it's just hanging there, with it's like just little clues, maybe to trigger our childhood memories of stories in the woods or something, because it does trigger me. You're thinking how beautiful these woods are, and in that same paragraph, out of nowhere, there's that great
Yeah,
camouflage.
yeah,
Obviously, the bear's camouflaged in the aspen, and all, where did he come from? And horrible, too. Horrible that he pulls that poor guy away.
yeah. He's feasting on something, so his muzzle is all like bloodied and stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he pulls the Delaware away, and that what yeah, like what's kind of interesting to me also about this chapter is that um there is this narrator, right? And the narrator, I guess I'm just going to call him a him because I assume it's a I could gender him that way. But like the narrator generally focalizes the narration through either the kid, like he follows the kid for the first however many chapters, and then generally like when the kid is with the Glanton gang, it's like he just kind of generally focalizes through the gang in
Mm-hmm.
general.
Mm-hmm.
But we get this passage where the narrator focalizes through the Delawares. So the Delawares kind of, take center stage in a bit in this narration, and it's pretty interesting, like what he says about the Delawares. Like how do we read this kind of portrait that he gives of them? They were men of another time for all that they bore Christian names, although we never learn any
Mm-hmm.
name of any indigenous character in this novel. We don't know any of their names,
Mm-hmm.
except for, maybe leaders like
Mm-hmm.
Magus Coloradus or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They did not speak, they were men of another time for all that they bore Christian names, and they had lived all their lives in a wilderness, as had their fathers before them. They learnt war by warring, the generations driven from the eastern shores across a continent, from the ashes of Gnadenhutten onto the prairies and across the outlets to the bloodlands of the west.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like really interesting. Like, why would Cormac McCarthy mention Gnadenhutten, which was like a massacre that took place in the 18th century, in the 1700s or something like that?
1772, yeah. I know. I mean, that's another thing in the book you're reading and you've got to stop. You can't flow through. You got to stop and find out what that is. Which, we haven't really even said how many times you might stop reading this book and you're diverted from that readerly experience of escape. There's no escape per se reading Blood Meridian. You've got to do the work. You definitely have to do the work. And that was a terrible massacre of about 100 people. They raped it, of pacifists. They were indigenous people who had taken up Christianity, if I understand correctly, and hence their Christian names. They'd probably been semi-assimilated. Uh, Hugh Brody had an explanation for how many indigenous people took up Christianity because the idea was, why turn down another god? There was a real feeling of like, oh, you've got a god? Okay, I'll enjoy that too. I'm not going to turn down any gods. And of course, that would sometimes turn against them and help them be assimilated or attempt to assimilate their culture or annihilate their culture. Um,
Yeah, that's true. And that idea of syncretism or whatever, it suggests a kind of way of relating to other people that would be kind of, again, sort of alien to the Glanton gang as exemplary of, the Western settler colonial mindset or something like that.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
like the idea that politics is not, you know, how to distinguish between your collective friend and your collective enemy for the benefit of your own nation or something like that, but it would be like mediating between different parties. So like the Delawares were had a long history, like of Algonquian speaking peoples that had their highest political idea in peacemaking and alliance formation rather than in, distinguishing friend and enemy, although obviously they did, but it was about establishing coalitions and stuff like that. And it's funny for me because like I was reading this book by early American historian Amy Shute, and she has an example of when some Dutch explorers were, I don't know, they were coming down a river and they had no supplies and winter was setting in, and nine different chiefs from nine different, what would become Delaware groups visited these truculent explorers and offered them an alliance, right? So here you have like a strong collective offering a weak party an alliance, which is like kind of alien to, I think, Western political conceptions. If there's something weak, you must destroy it even
Right,
more.
right,
Um,
right. Oh, and the people at Newtonham, they were pacifists. They were Christian pacifists, almost like Amish kind of um, counterculture.
yeah, I mean, that history is super complicated, right?
Yeah.
Like all sorts of different indigenous groups had allied themselves with different European parties, the French or the British or the American. And, it was really easy to accuse any indigenous group or band like to of any kind of treachery. And it's basically kind of demagoguery, like you're frustrated with your living conditions. Well, go take it out on this group, and that's what happened to these 100 converts who were kind of like driven from a place,
Mm,
and then but their harvest wasn't done, so they went to collect their corn or something like that, and then this kind of militia, yeah, took one particular weapon and killed 100 people, including like 40 kids,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with a blunt force, trauma type of
Mm-hmm.
attack.
Yeah. Ugh. It is
But
interesting.
it's also kind of weird that these Delawares then are associated with a peaceful group of Delawares who had mediated their difference, their cultural differences and come to a different way of living or something. And then we have these Delawares. So they're kind of a mystery. Like why? How did they come? Well, they are mentioned in Chamberlain's book. So McCarthy is
Mhm.
taking, putting these Delawares in because Chamberlain had mentioned that there were Delawares in Glanton's gang. But how did these particular Delawares like come to work with the Glanton gang? And it's
Right?
not like uh, the Delawares didn't have historically a lot of resentment toward European settlers for various reasons, broken promises, and all sorts of things, like. So
Yeah.
it's just odd that they're here,
It
like.
is odd. Yeah. Especially when you can test it. I think it goes to what we talked about briefly last episode about that war isn't one thing. It's like saying a feminist is one thing, an anarchist is one thing, a liberal is one thing, or or a pacifist. I mean that war isn't one thing. There's many different ways of competition, some more creative and passive than others, and that we're adapting probably because of resource issues and resource distribution or redistribution, and we're not entirely sure why they joined. And it's so interesting that he puts that in there at all. He didn't have to. He didn't have to mention that massacre at all.
Yeah, so it almost and it's of course the only time that word is mentioned in the novel. So
Yeah.
the fewer times the word is mentioned, maybe
Hmm.
the more you should look at that word or something.
I think you're right. I think you're right. It goes and then if you hear something all the time, it's like it ruins it for you because then it's like, okay, I got it, I got it. Listen, I love Oliver Stone, but he does so many flashbacks. Sometimes you're like, I got it, I understood. Don't have to over explain. But yes, it does, it stands out. You have to stop and look it up. It completely stands out. I like how they also describe that they go and house just a little bit about cut to sign as a way that they go looking for tracks. you know? And I mean, certainly, I don't think any of us would understand what that was without looking it up unless you lived in a rural area, or I have a friend who was in Vietnam and he was a really excellent in special forces at sniper and finding people. So if his dogs went lost, he would cut to sign. He would go out and look for them in the fields in Iowa, right?
Right.
But most of us wouldn't really know about that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's just the different discourses that McCarthy draws on. It's
Hmm.
pretty astounding.
Hmm. And the section when they come back, in the chapter titles, it's called Another Probate. They come back, have the dead horse, I mean the horse, the lost Delaware's horse, and they take their possessions.
Yeah.
And it's this other legal aspect in the novel again that Cormac definitely has his interests in legality. What's legal,
Yeah,
what's
yeah, it's definitely a different kind of probate, and it's a tragic one in a way because like this is the first of the Delawares, I think, to die, but they will all be dead by the end of the novel, and that the deaths of all the Delawares it's sort of maybe also a kind of a microcosmic example of the larger sort of genocide
Mhm.
that haunts the novel.
Well, I think that we see that too. We see how much they cared for their other companion, where they take all that time to go find them. What were they going to do? It was possibly they were still alive, that the bear dropped them somewhere. Maybe they were thinking that, or maybe they were thinking bring them back. But they definitely spent a lot of time and effort to go back and look for them. And it was accepted by the other 19 people or
Yeah, and
50 people waiting.
they returned to the gang
Yeah,
after they
yeah,
done their mission,
yeah,
which is yeah, it's all interesting stuff.
it is.
And so when the Delawares catch up back to the gang has sort of moved, I think, from modern day New Mexico kind of into Arizona-ish territory, if I'm not mistaken, and you know
Yeah.
the Chaco Canyon area and Keat Seal.
Seal, yes.
They 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 camp in the ruins of an older culture, and we get two stories really by the judge. Well, you know, we get again the sort of like another portrait of the judge
Hmm.
chapter, this time as a
That's so true.
storyteller,
And a draftsperson.
draftsperson, storyteller,
Yep.
rhetorician, maybe philosopher.
Hmm. I know. It's amazing. I actually hate this part of the book. And I like what's the first story? Oh, he talks to Webster about portraiture, right? There's
Yeah,
one
because
character.
he found all this stuff right in the ruins that he was exploring, including that the little boot from the Spanish conquistador or something like that.
Oh,
Right, and
right.
he draws that he draws sketches a picture of that, and then crushes it up into a ball of foil and pitches it into the fire. So he destroys the thing that he turns into a representation.
Exactly.
Oh,
And
so we have, yeah, we have, and the chapter subheading, I think, is representation and things. So this is like the articulation of a pretty recalcitrant problem, I think, that McCarthy had throughout his career with, you know, what language does, especially to the
Mhm.
world, you know, like um, I think he thinks that this is like language in its parasitical formation, right? Like language is a virus
Mhm.
that destroys its host.
Mhm.
You know, so the judge as, you know, pitching this, you know, you could consider it a rare artifact, I guess, you know, like from a historical point of view. He just like draws a picture of it and just casually destroys the thing, right? Because maybe in the end only what exists in his book exists or is allowed to exist.
Right. I
You know,
took that I took that as a very interesting juxtaposition to now I don't know about Keat Seal, the runes there. But they're from the same time period as Chaco Canyon, and it seems like they're kind of close to each other. You definitely in a car could drive from one to the other and be there for the next day, like stay overnight and see both. Oh, over a couple of days, you could see both. Obviously longer to ride, but I think maybe there must have been some crossover culture. But a Chaco Canyon, breaking pottery is something you do that humans aren't going to use it anymore, and it's almost like a ritual or a sacrifice, and it's very and they but they keep the chipped pottery, and they just there's a huge mound of them at Chaco Canyon, whereas it's different than what the judge is doing. He's literally damaging them,
Right.
destroying them, making them,
Yeah.
what was the word you used, expunge?
Yeah, well, he uses that word,
He
right?
used that
Like,
word, yeah.
and that's, I guess, a kind of a well, yeah, like he just he loves paradoxes, I think, and he likes to speak in them because he likes tricking people.
Yes.
But he says, yeah, this is when he has this conversation with Marcus Webster,
Hmm.
who asks the judge what he aims to do with these notes and sketches, and the judge smiles and says that it is his intention to expunge them from the memory of man,
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is a weird sort of paradox, right? Like, I mean, you're expunging something from memory by putting it into a book. Aren't books actually made as memory aids?
Right. Right.
So, it's kind of curious
Yes.
what he means by that. He doesn't seem to be really serious. I don't know. It's hard. He seems to be a bit I don't know, sarcastic or something here too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I once associated that statement with something from Thomas Mann's sort of novella Tonio Kruger,
Hmm.
where in Tonio Kruger, Thomas Mann uses this phrase, "I must sleep, but you must dance,"
Hmm.
which McCarthy kind of quotes in a garbled way at the end of the novel.
Hmm.
But Antonio Kruger is like a writer, and he says that, expressing something in writing is the same as getting rid of it. You don't need it once it's been put into writing.
Hmm.
So maybe that sort of like attitude McCarthy kind of extrapolates and turns it into a meditation on the destructive power of language, that, like language seems to contain the world when really it's in the world, it's part of the world, and therefore it can't explain the thing that of which it is a part.
Hmm. It's interesting. I mean, the only time I feel that is sometimes when I'm finishing a painting. I feel like I'm getting that out of my system and it's a painting. The only thing is that, it's been kind of a joke my whole life that I'm making the same painting over and over again. But there is a feeling of like release and slightly different, but that writing and that it's done, it's so dismissive of the work in a way, but maybe it is that maybe that is that driving force though. You need to get it out of you or something. But then you look at many writers and they same thing. They have the themes come over and over again in their works. So
Well, McCarthy is one of them and would
and
probably
Shakespeare, yes.
proudly say so.
Yes, proudly say so.
Rightly told, all tales are one, which is arguable. I think like there's
Hmm.
you know, my story is not your story.
True.
They overlap, but they're different.
Right. And different than the theory that there's only seven stories. Rags to riches, princess, virgin, savior. Yeah. This.
But yeah, this kind of conversation is really interesting, and I think like I personally I think like the judge's story. So he tells this story, this little story about this guy for whom he painted a portrait,
Hmm.
who got all obsessed with the portrait. That's like the first story, and then he tells kind of this a second story about the harness maker, which really it contains within it another story about the Anasazi.
Yeah.
So we have these kind of stories, and then I feel like, in this chapter and in these stories, like McCarthy is sort of like using the judge to meditate on art, I guess, and its power. Like the judges. It's kind of silly, right? Like, and he says, this man for whom he painted a portrait, so like was the portrait
Mhm.
to him that he would not suffer it creased nor anything to touch it, and so they had to bury it, and like to as if the man's soul was at hazard by the existence of this likeness of him.
Mhm.
So it's just kind of cool that there's this power attributed to being like, to
Mhm.
likeness, to similitude. And we've, been obviously talking about his use of similes and the various kinds of uses, but like this is really a kind of it's sort of like sympathetic magic, it's like if you're a shaman, you pour water on the ground out of a pitcher if you want it to rain or something, because the sky will see you and want to imitate you, because
Mm.
everything is connected via their potential to be similar to one another.
I guess tithing is like that too when you donate 10% of your paycheck. I think people do believe that letting that go is leaving room for more to come back to you, you know. And I suppose there's some altruism there too, but there's also the sense of magic. Yeah, well, these two stories, that story I'm okay with. There's two things that really bother me in this chapter. One, the way that the judge walks around the kivas. Those are sacred spaces. They talk about some of the ladders being broken. Some of those ladders would probably be to climb up to the buildings in general. But I'm aware that also there's kiva ladders which are for going into a ceremonial space.
Right.
It just bugs me that he's walking around there. I just can't stand it. I've been to a couple of pueblos that have kivas, and you're not allowed to even. Somebody put their foot on the ladder to tie their shoelaces, and it was completely unacceptable to do that.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
um, and so it bugs me so badly that he's doing that. But when I got to this story, I completely forgot it was in this chapter. I block it out every time I read Blood Meridian, and maybe I even skim past it, like speed read. I hate this story, the story of the shop, the
Weapon maker, yeah.
harness maker. Oh my God, I can't stand it. And then here it comes again. I'm reading it, and I'm like, I hate this story. This makes no sense to me, and I can't stand reading it. And then I sent you some notes and said I hate the story. And then I thought, I'm going to read it out loud to my husband. Maybe he can tell me what it means, or we can talk about it or something. As I started to read it to him, I started to really kind of connect to it. I started to not hate it as much. And I had the sense that I had a feeling I know where it was coming from.
Okay.
I don't know if I know all of it, but I think that it's a little bit about the problems with having a bad father, I would certainly say. The story involves a harness keeper that opens up a shop in the middle of nowhere. I don't know why he did that, for one thing. Why didn't you stay in the city? And I guess he wanted to get away from the competition. It's something about working. I think definitely you could write about the working world with this story, this fable. And then he goes into they're not making any money, so he dresses up as a First Nations or an Indigenous person and hides in the woods and asks for money. It's so bizarre, and it's also so racist. Like when I think about Vancouver, where you may find that the lifestyle of Indigenous people might be so hard for them to fit in the city in Vancouver in Canada, that you may find people asking for money who are displaced. So I hate this story so much, but I started to realize it reminded me of a couple of other stories. And then I started thinking, okay, so the guy he runs into a traveler and he's dressed as this First Nations person or indigenous, like an Indian, and he tries to get money from him, and the guy chews him out for cultural appropriation. And it's so amazing that I never noticed that really, that he was culturally appropriating somebody because I just didn't like the story so much, I just didn't engage with it. In a serious way. I always just feel afraid of it. You know what it is? When I was a kid and sometimes on TV, oh, maybe Star Trek would come. Listen, I love Star Trek. It's not that I don't like Star Trek, but when I was a kid, Westerns and Star Trek came on, and I was always afraid of the men in it. I found them very, like, I couldn't understand them. They were so harsh that I was afraid. I was like, I don't understand how they talk or anything like that. Why do they act this way? I don't know if it's funny, and now I'm obsessed with Blood Meridian. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
those guys are pussycats compared to Blood Meridian. I also know a couple of women when I ask them at conferences why are you so into Cormac, they go, "Oh, well, the men." Like they're talking about guys. I was like, "Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah." Yeah, so this traveler goes back to stay with him because maybe the harness maker has had a change of heart and realized he's done something wrong. I mean, he definitely shames him. I would say that was a shame, shaming him.
Yes, it absolutely was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so you're thinking the harness maker is like, oh, come to Jesus moment, I'll settle down. Now, I didn't realize until I was reading it out loud. Oh, when my husband says, Steak says, oh, this guy's Christian. He's giving him a Christian lesson at the house. I'm like, oh, I see, I just didn't get that before. Which is very interesting because this harness maker is a pretty bitter, sour man who is rude to his family and horrible to them and cold, and they're not happy. How do you take this story?
Well, yeah, I take it again like I'm really starting to see like I love this chapter by chapter slow pace
Mm,
that we're reading because I can really see like that McCarthy is working variation on a theme upon variation on a theme over and over again, right? Like one thing that I forgot to mention about his conversation with Marcus is one of my favorite kind of statements by the judge, which I find kind of profound,
mm,
where he says, you know, whether in my book or not, everyone is tabernacled in every other, and he in exchange, and so on, and an endless complexity of being and witness to the uttermost edge of the world.
mm,
So the idea that you are tabernacled in me and vice versa. Well, first of all, tabernacle is like a pretty biblical word, right? It's like a sacred space, you know, it's a temple. So um, the other is entempled within me
mm,
and me within them and everyone within everyone else to the uttermost edge of complexity. That's a really like beautiful thing. And if it's tabernacled, you know, if it's sacred,
mhm,
that you know, we are entangled, then why are we killing each other? You know, if it's sacred.
mm,
There may be an answer to that, you know, because to be sacred is also to be at once untouchable and eminently killable. If you go back to Giorgio Agamben's, you know, sort of argument about Homo sacer.
mm,
But, you know, like, so like this idea that the judge, first of all, says like, you know, to Marcus, Marcus like doesn't want to be in the judge's book, and I kind of wonder why. Like people are calling him out for being vain or something, but maybe he's like he's a criminal. He doesn't want his face there, right? Like
right.
something like that, right? And the judge is like, well, no matter if I put you in my book, you're in somebody's heart. Like you, somebody will recognize you, right? And
Yeah.
witness either against you or for you.
Mm,
You know, and so this harness maker, when the traveler concludes by telling the old man that he was a loss to God and man alike, and would remain so until he took his brother into his heart,
mm,
as he would take himself in and he come upon his own person in want in some desert place in the world. So again, like but the traveler's like, since we're strangers and since I have to be the witness of you and you have to be the witness of me, and this is a kind of a holy
mm,
uh, function. Shouldn't we be hospitable toward one another? That's what the traveler is saying, and
mm,
the harness maker is like, yeah, you know, obviously that's true, but I resent you pointing that out to me
right.
and
Because
showing me as a piece of shit that I have become, right? But
mm,
it's kind of a confidence man too. Like it is cultural appropriation, but why is he dressing like
mm,
a Native American to, you know, to is he scaring people into money? Is he making them pity?
mhm.
You know, like, are you going to pity a beggar more if they're native, or are you going to be scared and give the money? And like, so like,
Good
there's
point.
some calculations there, like why he's doing that, right? So he is a confidence trickster,
Um,
and in a way, like, the traveler is probably chiding him for misrepresenting himself.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. And then he is goes for dinner and his kids and his wife love this traveler guy. He's like the best company on the planet.
Because he's the only company.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Because first of all, her husband's horrible, the harness maker, and then he's just charming company. Um, and then this is the part that I start to really hate is the traveler. Oh, he asked for money, right? The harness maker goes, "Give me money." He doesn't even now that it's all out in the open, he goes, "Well, really, I just want money, and that's not enough money. Now you need to give my wife." And this guy's like, "No, I got to get going," and he walks him in the woods and he kills him. And I'm like, "What?" Every time I'm like, "What the hell?" And keeps it secret and tells his wife that they were robbed, and then they mourn him forever, which must just rub that harness maker terribly the wrong way because they mourn him and they wouldn't even mourn the harness maker if he did. But then he confesses to his son at the end of his life that he killed that traveler, and the son goes out and kills people forever. So I'm like, is this the origin story of the judge? Maybe it's the origin story of all these guys in the gang. That's how I came to think of it, is that it's their story of the bad father, the violent father, the lying father, keeping a secret like this. Then you find out who they are, and you're just like disenfranchised. You're going to fly a plane into a building. You're going to go blow up the opera house if you're in Joseph Conrad's world. This is how disenfranchisement happens. I also thought it
In that gendered way
in that gendered way. Yeah,
among
I mean, it could probably
brothers.
happen to it probably could happen to women too. I mean, we were talking about this the other day, and I said, yeah, women, I mean, the mothers and daughters have their own thing, but a lot of times there's a woman in your midst who's like a queen bee, and if you don't do things her way, you can't be friends. And or you get a single white female, you start dressing alike, she whoever the person is, they start to act like you or you like them or something. I mean, women don't have these pure of heart relationships either necessarily. All got our egos and
Of course.
this is why the story is horrible though, because it's so hard to understand. But it reminded me of two other stories. And I would like to share them if I could, because maybe other people will go out there and look at them. One is a story called The Local Stigmatic, and it's a play by Heathcote Williams. And Al Pacino, I came across it when Al Pacino was filming it endlessly for years. He couldn't finish filming it. And he was in Vanity Fair, and one of his quotes was, "No, it's not against the law. It's not a crime to want to be famous. It's a crime to be famous." And basically, the story is in a bar. These two guys are in a bar, and they are feeling pretty hard done by. And I'll just kind of riff it off of Wikipedia because it's easier than me making up a story and getting lost. And they're talking about their lives and their friendships and their feelings of being overlooked and misunderstood by society. They are disillusioned with the world around them and they are consumed by bitterness, which I would say the shopkeeper is. The two friends dream of committing acts of violence against those who they see as symbols of their frustration and alienation. Their fixation on a local celebrity who becomes a target of their anger leads them down a dark path that explores themes of identity, social alienation, and the desire for recognition. And so this harness maker reminded me of that story. And these two guys in the bar, they slash the actor's face. They don't kill him, but they damage his product, if you will, or his
See, yeah.
his livelihood. And then there's a short story by John Fowles, who wrote The French Lieutenant's Woman.
Right.
Yeah, The Collector, a serial killer story. Um, and it's a short story called Poor Coco. And Coco is a clown, which is kind of an interesting thing too, because we have a lot of clowns in Blood Meridian, which we haven't really. We're getting a second clown in this chapter coming up in a minute. It's about a writer, an academic, and a historian. He's lent his friend's house, like a cottage in the country, to write his magnus opus. He's collected all his work and he's left alone and he loves the neighborhood. He goes out shopping, comes back and reads and starts to write. And one night a burglar goes into this house, and he catches him in the room, and this burglar ties him up. And they spend the night talking. And the writer says, why don't you live better? Why you could be anything. You could have made something of yourself, basically. Why have you done this? And eventually by the end of the night, the burglar says, I'm not going to do anything to you. I don't think they even steal anything. I think they just take off. But by the time the neighbors find this writer, this academic historian, they untie him and he hasn't done anything, but what he did was he burnt all of his research. The burglar destroyed all of his research. So these stories and the judge kind of remind me of that.
Right. Yeah.
As if the judge is telling us why he's the way he is and why the Glanton gang is the way it is. That's how I take it now, and now I don't hate it as much.
It's kind of a iteration on the parable of the prodigal son and the good son.
Hmm. I
Do
don't
you
know that.
do you
I don't know
remember
that story.
the Nick Cave song, "The Good Son"?
Yes.
Yeah, Nick Cave in that song. I don't remember the lyric exactly, but there's a direct reference to Child
Oh.
of God. The good son had queer plans or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the good son, is jealous of the prodigal, and the prodigal, like has gone away, steals all the attention, blah blah blah, and so in a way, like the harness maker's biological kid is sort of like the good son, and
Hmm.
it's weird that yeah, that the harness maker's kid is jealous of the traveler for being murdered. Like for what? What is he jealous of him
Yeah,
for?
I don't
Because
understand that.
because his mother worshipped his grave,
Right, right.
because his father probably like kept a secret, and so that was like a something precious to the father, even that he had committed this crime, like.
Hmm.
So it is interesting that, so if the judge is the good son
Hmm.
who's gone away to become a killer of men after not being able to resolve his jealousy for his dead brother, I guess. Like I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to say that I think it could be an origin story, but oh, the other fun thing that's amazing about it, that this is the part that's cool, is after the judge tells the story, everybody goes, "That's not in North Carolina. That's down the street from where I grew up."
Yeah.
Everybody knows the story,
Yeah.
and they know the ending, and they think their cousin is part of it. And in that story, also, I forgot there's a performer, a minstrel, perhaps, and in costume with a pink coffin that walks by the house. Is that not correct in that story?
Yeah, I think it's a black funeral.
Okay, that's the other part is
Um,
that very confusing to me.
yeah, that's a really yeah, difficult paragraph to read because he just
Yes.
uses the N
Oh,
word over and over again, the
oh, it's
judge, and like
terrible.
and he's like looking around, he's like uh and there's obviously the N word is dehumanizing to begin with, but
Yeah,
drawing a funeral hearse for one of his own kind, like so that
right.
kind of racist language is like again, like I think it was last time and probably some other times where I've been arguing over and over again that in terms of the novels like racial politics, there is this kind of you know, analogous to Afro-pessimism or to Frank B. Wilderson's idea of the red, white, and black.
Hmm.
That the social ontology of America is kind of constituted out of these three racial positions. And, there is, even though we're in the American Southwest, and this is kind of about, indigenous genocide, there's still the figure of blackness is like all over this novel as we've explored before. And so this kind of like the judge's own use of this word is puzzling to me, like
Hmm.
it's hard to read.
Well, and I think didn't somebody say, "Hey, how long are you going to continue to use the N-word to Cormac McCarthy?" And he goes, "Until they stop me."
Oh, really?
I'm paraphrasing it. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing it, but I guess he wanted it for authenticity, I'm assuming.
Well, he is a Southern writer, I guess. I
Yeah,
don't know, like,
yeah.
yeah, if that's necessary for a white Southern writer
I don't
to,
know either. I don't know either.
I don't know, like, yeah, that's,
It's really, I would say that's really about it does underscore how one would feel about the judge. I mean, it is making his character extremely apparent.
well, I'm gonna argue in the Anasazi stuff that there is this kind of white supremacy that
Yeah.
that will be able to
Mm,
dissolve some paradoxes. But like, if you want to go back to everybody knew this story and but they
yeah.
all had a different interpretation of it and they were all arguing with each other. Like to me, I see that at least in two ways. On the one hand, because I do feel like his storytelling is very formalistic and very artistic and very heightened poetic language, right? Like, this is somebody who must have practiced this story before. He's not just saying it off the cuff. It very polished. And so it is kind of about art. So like everybody arguing about the meaning of the story and what it's really
Mhm.
about is sort of like, a
Like us.
Cormac satiric portrait of us, the critics. Or like it's also like because they are like engulfed in ancient Pueblan territory.
Mhm.
They're under the shadow of Keat Seal, and they're in this area. And the idea of storytelling and everyone has a different variation on the same story.
Mhm.
This is like because there is no authoritative version of a particular story, maybe, in different kinds of indigenous contexts, there may be origin stories, creation stories, all sorts of stories, but there may not be like a definitive version. Nobody's looking for the original version, the way we in the West kind of say, well, what was Cormac McCarthy, the author's intention, right? Like
Mhm.
only he will truly be able to determine, what
Right.
this means.
Right.
So like, yeah, and you know, Keat Seal and the Anasazi, these are, I think, Navajo words.
Mm.
And like I kind of got lost down a little bit of a rabbit hole looking at different versions of the story of the Navajo origin story of the Great Gambler.
Mm.
Like in the Great Gambler is a kind of trickster god who actually kind of reminds me of Holden as well. So
Mm.
because he's a gambler, he's a trickster, he steals men's souls, like just like the Great Gambler god of
Mhm.
the Navajo. Anyways, like so yeah, the argument of the different listeners, like what is the right version of the story, like it's a great addition, like to the story that
It is. It is.
it could mean many different things.
Yeah. Yeah. It could. Um, if anyone's listening and they have a theory, please email us or contact us. We'd like to hear your
Yeah.
version. I mean, I don't.
So like the story is like so he tells the story of
Yeah.
the harness maker, but why he tells that is because somebody asks him what kind of Indians were these who made these ruins. And so
Right.
instead of saying these were the Anasazi, they did this and that, he tells this story, right?
Mhm.
And so like that's like a kind of setup to his argument about the significance of these ruins and stuff like that. And so this is where he, like he does say like the people who once lived here are called the Anasazi. So he knows that Navajo word for
Mhm.
the old ones, and nowadays it's maybe about as meaningful, well, maybe a little bit more, but it's like the Apache, right? Apache means enemy or something. It
Mhm.
doesn't identify a, a band the way they would identify themselves or something. And
Correct.
so the Anasazi is the same.
Mhm. Mhm.
But he knows that word at least, and he makes up a story about the ruins and about how like the indigenous people who live around there now or in that time, how they relate to these ruins, right?
Mhm.
And so, like he says, the old ones are gone like phantoms, and the savages wander these canyons to the sound of an ancient laughter. In their crude huts, they crouch and in darkness and listen to the fear seeping out of the rock. And
Mhm.
then he mentions all progressions from a higher to a lower order are marked by ruins and mystery and a residue of nameless rage. So he's kind of saying that, he's taking sort of like a social Darwinist evolutionary kind of view, like, oh, well, these Anasazi, they were great because they built these stone,
Mhm.
they built in stone, right? They built houses and dwellings and these other people, they're less than them because they don't build in stone, but they live under the ruins. And so the judge sees a kind of like he tells a story of decline of, in indigeneity or something like that, which is, ridiculous from
It is.
even from a Navajo point of view, but it's the Navajo are not the only ones who would lay claim to, the ancient Puebloan people who would, who would have lived in Quetzal in those places.
It's also like saying people in Italy have come down a notch and they're assholes or they're useless and their hierarchy they've lowered themselves because they wouldn't play the game of the Roman Empire anymore. At Chaco Canyon, there's a great film called The Mystery of Chaco Canyon, um, narrated by Robert Redford, but interviewing several anthropologists and people studying. These people were scientists that built them. They were scientists, every bit as much as what we would call a scientist now. They just may not have had that word at the time. And they abandoned the buildings. They boarded them up, like not boarded, but they had doorways. They put stones in them. They were there for 800 years or something, for hundreds of years, and utilizing it. We're still not entirely, people still are, unless the community is keeping it secret, which I don't blame them. But some of these guys that they interviewed, the anthropologists and who were indigenous people, said sometimes you have to change things. Sometimes you have to walk away. This buildings gave a certain amount of power, and some people would take advantage of it. And you've got to walk away. What was also interesting was that they didn't walk away from Chaco Canyon overnight. They did take time to close it up and to slowly pull away from it. Um, Maybe so it didn't become a dangerous thing. I mean, we're not really sure. But it is fascinating that it wasn't because of a problem of staying in a hierarchical thing. It was to leave it, that it was actually dangerous to keep running these kind of buildings. And I can't say that Keats Seal is the same as Chaco Canyon. I have not been there and I don't know. But it has similar qualities to it and similar architectural features to it. And it is interesting it was left, you know? I mean, speaking of the Anasazi, they had been a subsistence farming community before the Spaniards brought horses. When horses arrived in North America, because they had gone extinct in the Ice Age, they
Right.
became hunters and gatherers again. They
Yeah.
became, and this is what we were saying about war last time, and even what you were saying earlier in this podcast. So we're not necessarily written. Once you do something, doesn't mean you have to do it forever. Doesn't mean it's you. We're able to switch gears and change things. We are able to. It may be unconscious. What might not be a board of directors saying, "Hey, let's not do this anymore." It might be that I'm sick of it. I'm not doing it anymore. It could be grassroots, or it could be all 1 year. It's like the weather changed and the environment changed. Not worth our time to go here or do this actually more. So yes, they
Yeah,
did.
like we think of like houses in stone as settlements where you live for your whole life. But
Right.
even like ancient Sumerian cities, like where,
Mhm.
where Gilgamesh was king or something
Mhm.
like that, they were sort of agriculturalists
Mhm.
who would retire within the city walls at night and, just drink or whatever at bars or go home. But most of their lives were spent outside of the city.
Yeah.
So, the judge seems to think put more stock into the importance of this building in stone than probably the actual builders
Yeah,
did.
probably. It's a great point, and I think that this is more of the reasons when I started first becoming familiar with the judge and really starting, I dislike him so much from this chapter. It's really becoming apparent who he is and his even the mind games with the drawing, the portrait and everything, you know. And here he's saying that these people have dropped a notch and he's actually wrong. He's actually just wrong about the history. And
He's wrong, but I think like he's not aiming for accuracy. I
well,
think he like again like I also see this as sort of like um Cormac McCarthy's opportunity to talk about art again through
yeah,
this idea of building and especially like stone building.
that's so true. Good point. Good
Like
point.
because again like but who builds in stone seeks to alter the structure of the universe. And so it was with these masons, however primitive their work may seem to us. Like again, what does this even mean? Like building in stone alters the structure of the universe. Like from a if this is like a metaphor for art, I can see what that might mean. Even like, Blood Meridian as a ruins,
Hmm.
of a kind of a thought trajectory or something like that. It has like altered the structure of the universe. You and I are friends. Would we have been friends if it weren't for Blood Meridian? We would
Probably
never
not.
have known each other, right?
That's
Like,
right.
so in some ways, like art as a kind of agent to reorganize um, the universe, that makes sense to me. But
I took it as environmental. In the same in the stonemason. And when he talks about like the Promethean thing, that's a curse. We shouldn't be striking the fire out. As a very eco-terrorist, like a very extreme way that we shouldn't be killing whales. We should not be changing the nature of the stone in the earth. Is McCarthy saying we should be just living in you know in shelters that are very environmentally? I don't know, or the judge. But the judge is not saying that. He thinks it's an accomplishment. But I always took it as being environmental. Like, how humble are we going to be? We're worried about data centers running AI to the power of Thailand for a year. Equivalent. When you use AI on your phone, you're using so much more electricity than just Google. It's not the
yeah,
same as Google and
yeah.
your phone. So which one is there a level of wrong? Or does it go all the way back to don't even touch the stones? Sleep outside.
But,
I
you
don't
know,
know. I don't
think
know.
about think about the end of No Country for Old Men, where
Yes.
Belle is meditating on this stone water trough he sees in some place in France during the war, right? So, he's like, I want something like that. It's like a promise in my heart. I
Mm,
don't want to build a actual water trough, but I mean, there are even water troughs in here, right? In Keat
mhm,
Seal, there's a mention of the stone Asicarias or something like that, and that's communal building
mhm,
for community purposes, right? Like, obviously, the judge is sort of like he's like an immature Sutri, like in Sutri, there's that passage where Sutri's like, well, in my youth, I wanted to like erect a stone in the void with my name on it as a kind of like gesture of contempt towards the indifference of the universe. But
mhm,
I've recanted of that vanity. Well, the judge is still in that phase where he's like, only the monumental means anything. You have to have made some kind of a mark. But like again, like the relation of the judge in this book comes again at the end of his story, right? Where he says, where he gets into a little conversation with Tobin. Tobin says, well, I see like both um, the son who has a dead father and therefore worships him as an idol, and the son who knows that his father is just a killer. I see them both at a disadvantage. And the judge, and so then they get into this argument about the necessity of culling.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
this is judged at his uh, like genocidal and sort of like social Darwinist
Mm,
worst, right? But he quotes the title of the novel again, right? He'll say, the way of the world is to bloom and to flower and die, but in the affairs of men there is no waning, and the noon of his expression signals the onset of night. His spirit is exhausted at the peak of his achievement. His meridian is at once his darkening and the evening of his day. So there's the title of the novel
mhm, mhm.
that the judge once again articulates. And like last chapter, when we meet the judge, we meet him at the meridian of the day, right? So there's this emphasis and so over determination of identifying the judge in the novel. So what does this mean? Um,
Yeah.
you know,
In
so and,
Yeah.
yeah,
In that way, it's like Vertigo and Jimmy Stewart and Hitchcock identifying with the remake and the obsession over making art and then making like me joking that I make the same painting over and over again. There is that kind of element. Yeah.
there
Um,
could be the element of like McCarthy knowing that, oh my God, I'm writing something that is tremendous, and but it will come back to haunt me because it's the great work of art that haunts the artist or something like that.
and I
So
think
like.
I think you're dead right.
The
I think,
spirit is exhausted at the peak of its achievement.
which also, speaking of stone, that's part of the pyramids, the riddle on the pyramids, isn't it? What starts out on four legs,
Oh,
moves to two
right,
legs, and then goes to three legs, right?
right, yes, yeah.
It's carved on a monument or pyramid in
Yeah,
ancient
the
Egypt. Yeah.
the Sphinx's riddle to
Thank you.
Oedipus.
Thank you. I know I got it in there somewhere. Yeah, it really could be that kind of weight of being, he wanted to be as good as Shakespeare. He wanted to be the greatest writer since Shakespeare. And I do think he is. Um, and then this novel does take a price. First of all, it must have been a hard experience writing it. I tried to write a serial killer once, and I found it really disturbing to write it. I felt like it went into my head too much. And then second of all, I think we know now that he was probably very much in love at the time of really bringing this novel together. I'm not sure how he kind of dealt with that. And and that it's so horrific. And then by leaving the way the novel ends and this general idea that different people can co-opt it with different agendas for their own political reasoning or their own artistic reasoning, struggling to find out the meaning of it, and yet it is ambiguous on some level, uh, you know, which is also the greatest part about it because you have to be rigorous to figure out what does this mean for the meaning of life in here, you know.
Yeah,
You do have to know who the judge is.
yeah, like when he says the noon of your expression signals the onset of night, or your spirit is exhausted at the peak of its achievement. This paradoxical statements, right?
Mhm.
You're at your maximum fullness, you are maximally empty. Like so you could
Yeah.
take those as paradoxes. One way that I think you can sort of kill the paradox, not that killing a paradox is necessary.
Mhm.
Maybe there are like irresolvable paradoxes, and those are generative and cool, but like when he's talking about blood meridian and stuff like that, I've noticed in some of my research that this kind of language was quite common in discussing the disappearance of native people from North America. So
Mm.
in an 1844 edition of Southern Quarterly Review, a not unsympathetic chaplain writing of the Winnebagos concludes, quote, "The snow melts not more certainly before the meridian sun than the savage races of the earth before the advancing tides of civilization."
Mhm.
Or, a little bit later in 1854, we read from some racist kind of scientific anthropology. It is clear as the sun at noonday that in a few generations more, the last of these red men will be numbered with the dead. So, this metaphor of blood meridian or the evening redness in the west, you could, when the judge says, the noon of his expression signals the onset of night, and he's talking about a species that is able to cull itself in order to progress. This is like social Darwinism.
Mhm.
So you can resolve the paradox by just replacing some phrases. So the noon of white supremacy's expression is the onset of night for indigenous people, or like the judge thinks that, whether you are savage or black or white, you are a man, right? And he says that even this crazy black person is a man among men, right? So we're all human, but there is a hierarchy within the human species, and the greater of the humans, it's inevitable, will like lead to the extinction of the less great. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's a kind of like apology for genocide. It's like, well, it's inevitable because we're a species that
Right.
calls ourselves. So it becomes this kind of like capitalist realism where
Mhm.
it's like, well, yeah, it's been there since the beginning, and this is just the way it is. So there's no point in crying about it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so like that would be one of the challenges of the novel
Yes,
is like is the judge right about all these things?
correct. Well, and that was the initial feeling when I first read it was like, this can't be true. This cannot be right. And forcing my friends to read it. So
Right, and that,
it
like
gets
so
really,
early critics would think of
yeah,
Blood Meridian as nihilist.
yes, yes. Right. And I do think that's the curse that he lives with, for writing this amazing novel is, that he had that weight on his shoulder. And no wonder he had to write another bad guy. He said that people did not understand this evil in the judge, and he never would have imagined that he had to write sugar. He thought it was very obvious. So, although he left ambiguity. But yeah, I mean, and this is why it's so great because, you're showing me, like in this chapter that I find so repulsive, this is, it doesn't matter if he's correct about what he's saying. They don't know that he's not. His audience that are sitting there around the fire don't know whether they're asking him, who are these people? They've already decided that he's the expert. So they've given away their power to him already. It's already a done deal. You know.
Yeah, I think the ambiguity is unavoidable too, because I don't really read characters as unitary. I see them as like
Mhm.
opportunities to do things at various points in the process. So the judge sometimes is like becomes an opportunity to work through in a kind of indirect way some questions about art or some
Yeah.
questions about social Darwinism or like so I don't look at them as but you know it is through the character of the judge that the idea of evil, maybe the feeling of it,
Mm.
it comes through the strongest,
Yeah.
you
No,
know.
you're right, and we already know that this is why it's successful because in this setting, that is also a full moon when he's telling those stories. That's June 6th in 1849. It's a full moon, so we're having this like ghost story. Who were these people? Who are these people? These
That's right. Yeah.
ancients, and
Yeah.
so it's a very evocative in terms of that because if you look carefully at it, it does say there's a full moon, and you can trace most of the time in the novel in every chapter. And it is giving that magical full moon ghost story thing. And if you look at Whales and Men or the stonemason or the counselor, one of the things that people complain the most about is those stories where one character talks for a long time and it's nothing's happening. Whereas in this novel, it's quite successful. We've already had the bears attacked somebody. We've had too much plot all of a sudden in this chapter. We had the poetry of the beginning. We had a bear take one of the Delawares. Maybe we do want to sit around and hear a story on the full moon. And he can go on like this, whereas it's unacceptable to some viewers in The Counselor or
Yeah,
other
that's a
stories.
really interesting point. Yeah. Yeah, and in terms of action, not really much happens in this chapter.
No.
It's again kind of a transitional chapter. Uh, to me, like having read a little bit ahead,
Mm,
chapter 12 is like maybe the darkest chapter
mm,
I've read so far. It's pretty awful.
mm, mm.
Um, it's sort of like I was thinking like it kind of reminded me a little bit of Toni Morrison's Beloved,
Oh,
because you know that Sethi kills her child, right? Like
yes,
you
I
kind
do.
of know that from the
Yeah,
beginning of the
yeah.
novel, well, or or if you're a moderately informed reader, you know that that's kind of what it's about. So, but Morrison doesn't narrate the murder until deep into the novel, right? So, and it's deep into Blood Meridian that the most awful stuff is happening, and yeah, there's lots to talk about with respect to
Definitely,
that too.
definitely. As we move further, by the end of the chapter, I love that part where they're climbing this cliff and they lose a mule, and um, Glanton is like he's kind of wired for sound. He's not even sleeping, and they're pushing and pushing. It's also June 21st, so it's the longest day in the year. And that way, because of the lopsided moon, we can figure out the times from the description of the moon. And they can almost push it. That's why they get stuck on that cliff where they have to sit under their horses on a very shallow
Right,
path.
right, yeah.
'Cause he was,
Yeah, that, speaking of variations on variations, like
yeah.
when the mule falls, like the narrator says, um, it fell from sight into a sink of cold blue space
Mhm.
that absolved it forever of memory,
Yes.
the mind of any living thing that was. So there's like the
Hmm.
expunge from the memory. Like here it
Hmm.
is happening again in a different context. Like, so it's like a variation on this idea of absolving or expunging.
Yeah, and it's like the judge is like, "See, I'm just like nature. I'm doing what I should be doing because nature does that too, or something." It kind of can give you that, and it's amazing that's all in the same chapter. A few days later,
Yeah.
pretty
And
cool.
we what did you think of, we kind of get an extended portrait of Glanton here too, and
Oh yeah.
it's like in a bit of a juxtaposition because in the next chapter he's like you know he's the
Mm.
leader of a group of mass murderers.
Right. I kind of you get a touchy-feely thing with Glanton this time because one, he takes time to look at a leaf. And
That's right, yeah.
he saw the perfection. And then they find a dog.
Yeah.
And he's not going to leave that dog behind. Like he obviously loves animals. He has something where he has a respect for dogs and horses.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's never going to leave that dog behind. And was it Davy Brown says, "You can't get that dog's crazy." And he goes, "Give me
Yeah.
some food. I can man anything that eats."
Yeah. Yeah.
And the next second, while they're trotting away, that dog is following Lantern.
Yeah. And then later in the novel, the dog befriends somebody else and Glanton gets angry at him or
Yeah, he's
something.
like jealous. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, he is kind of like painted in kind of a heroic sort of
Mm,
soft golden light
yes,
here,
yes.
but you know,
And that he
which is
can't.
brutal considering what happens in the next chapter.
Right. I like how it says near the end of the chapter too that he has so much pride, but he still can't believe that
Right, yes.
19 could elude these vicious killers out there. And he's driven to just pursue, pursue, pursue.
Yeah.
Which reminded me, I forgot how much I laughed since we last did our last episode. I kept laughing afterwards because I'm like, look at how hard they're working out here. And you said they're not working. They haven't done anything yet. And I've been laughing about it because it's true. They're they're just riding along. They're looking for work. They're job hunting or something. Yeah, it's pretty funny. They're just
It is, yeah, it's pretty you said job hunting, but they're literally hunting. Like, and that's one of the disturbing things, like like hunting and warring on the one hand are very separate. Uh, but the way they're pursuing is the way a hunter would pursue game, right? Like they're really tracking, and it's um and then they're just but it's not hunting because proper hunting you use what you hunt. But this
Mhm.
is just warring is just wasteful
Right.
expenditure.
And I wouldn't even call it warring. They're just collecting trophies to cash out. Right. I mean, it's really too glamorous. I mean, it's really complimenting their action even to call it warring. But I mean, that's a commentary on what war is too. You know?
What it has become, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, what it has become in this situation. In this situation. It's not the Renaissance fair.
Yeah, and again, like they when Glanton is like healthily paranoid, right? And he's like, I know they're somewhere, right? And
Yeah,
they're searching.
yeah.
They go to an abandoned village in at one point, and we read they dismounted and moved among the shelters, frail structures of saplings and weeds stuck into the ground and bent to at the top to form a rounded hovel over which a few rags of hide or old blankets remain. And that's like again going back to the judge's story about For whoever makes a shelter of reeds and hides has joined his spirit to the common destiny of creatures. As if that were a bad, like for that's
Mm.
a bad thing for the judge to join the common destiny of creatures. He wants to stand outside that order, but
Right.
anyways, it's just like another kind of repetition and variation of like something the judge said creeps out into the narration, and that's kind of interesting.
So true. So true. Well, I'm glad I kind of conquered that urban myth in there. Even though it's not urban, it would have been a rural myth, I guess.
So yeah, about deadbeat dads.
Yeah, about deadbeat dads. Thank you. That one. I conquered it. Yeah, it is about deadbeat dads. You're right.
That's yeah, you put it that way, and I totally agree. Like, um,
Yeah, it's a tough one. I hate it. But I did learn something.
there is like to me a slight echo of Melville's novel Pierre.
Oh yeah.
Pierre is like this really weird novel. It begins like really bad, well, excruciating to read because it's
Mm.
like a Victorian romance with a very uncomfortably incestuous relationship between a mother and her son.
Mm-hmm.
But Pierre has lost his father as a young man, and he just idolizes his father because his mother. It's sort of like in The Orchard Keeper, the way Mildred Ratner idolizes Kenneth Ratner, even though Kenneth Ratner is like a would-be murderer, right? Like
Right.
a petty thief and would-be murderer. So like, yeah, and Pierre Pierre idolizes his father like the traveler's son would idolize the traveler, or maybe like the harness maker's son idolized the harness maker until he found out that he was a killer. But again, like in Pierre, Pierre finds out that his father was a little bit more unsavory than he thought, or something like that. So there's this kind of, you
Yeah.
know, uh, discovery of the deadbeat in the dad
Mm.
in
Yeah.
Pierre as well.
Yeah. And I guess it's like natural born killers too, right? Remember Woody Harrelson, whose father actually did go to prison, the real life Woody Harrelson went to prison for murder. But the character in Natural Born Killers said, my dad was a murderer, I'm a murderer. I guess it's that feeling of, and maybe that ties into the judge of this feeling that you are destined by your either white supremacist. If you're white, you're destined to be better than other people in the manifest destiny world of Blood Meridian, or social Darwinism, that this idea, brain size, it's all bullshit. Since then, we found, it's definitely been proven that it's bullshit, but back then people really believed it, that
Yeah.
human beings were different from each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah, Zora Neale Hurston as a junior anthropologist or one of her first assignments was to measure the cranial size of Black people.
Yeah, they used little black beads, and Stephen Jay Gould wrote a great book called The Mismeasure of Man.
Right.
But yes, about the research completely, debunking that. But yeah, they'd pour into an empty skull these little beads, because how else do you measure the cavity, right? Even that part was kind of interesting that they figured out put lead beads. I think they're probably little lead. Put them in there and measure. Then you have to count them,
Right.
and
Okay.
completely bullshit. Right. But
Yeah.
we still say dolphins have a large brain. We say it almost metaphorically. I mean, dolphins are very intelligent, and so are whales. Um, but that's something else altogether. Uh, a conversation for another day.
That's right. For the whale
For the
episode.
whales and men episode, yeah. Well,
Well, I'm excited about and a little bit daunted by the next chapter
yeah,
because
me
it's
too.
so
Me
brutal.
too. Yeah. Well, get some nice, delicious chocolate to eat and relax, and a cup of tea and some cookies or something.
Okay.
All right. Maybe that will help. Or some, or just maybe some hardcore edibles. I don't know. Don't do it. Don't do edibles while you read it though. Um, Thank you for listening, everybody. And we really appreciate you. And if you have anything to say, you can message us on Instagram and or on our Substack page.
Or email?
email, which is bloodmeridiannow@gmail. I'm pretty sure that's it. It's been
That's
so
it.
long since we said it. Do we put a year in there? Did we call it Blood Meridian Now 1985 or just Blood Meridian Now? I think
Just
it's
blood email,
oh,
I
okay,
think.
just Blood Meridian Now at Gmail. All right. On that note, listen, talk to you next time.
Yeah. See you,
All right.
Candy.
All right, take care.
Bye.